Hey folks, whenever we say camera in a third-person video game, it gives this subtle implication that everything that is happening on screen is either being recorded or live streamed to us. This is an idea that has been toyed with by several video games. In Grand Theft Auto 4, shooting a person point blank often results in blood being splattered on the screen. In God of War 2018, the camera never does any hard cuts from start to finish, as if everything is being displayed through one long take. In Manhunt, though the game has a traditional camera style for the most part, executions are shot in a found footage style, as if being recorded by a shoddy handheld camera. But even then, the cameras in these games aren't really real cameras, not being part of the world in any way whatsoever, just being technical elements in order to ensure that the player gets a window to peer into and enjoy the gameplay and the story of a video game. What if there was a game where the term camera is taken in the most literal sense possible?
Let him go! Hey! Lynch! I'll fucking kill you!
The first thing that jumps out at anybody who comes into contact with Kane Lynch 2 Dog Days as soon as the game begins is its visual presentation. Unlike other third-person shooter games, Kane Lynch 2 immediately stands out for not looking like the prettiest, smoothest, and visually appealing video game. Instead, it looks ugly.
Just straight ahead.
While objectively the game's graphics aren't that bad for the time, they are absolutely ruined by what the game's art style is trying to be. Ugly.
Kane, get back!
From the moment that the camera starts shaking, as the cameraman follows the two main characters down the alleys of Shanghai, you just know exactly what this game is gonna be. Setting itself apart from other third-person shooters at the time, Kane Lynch 2 isn't just played, it's shot. Shot in a camcorder that feels like it fell out of a truck and that got picked up by an amateur cameraman trying to make a quick buck. The camera in this game is just as a part of the world as the rest of the game itself.
Oh shit! What? What the fuck?
During firefights, blood splatters on the lenses and the bitrate drops drastically due to the muzzle flashes and the explosions. Artifacting occurs on the screen whenever the camera gets to rattle around too much, and whenever you sprint, the camera shakes wildly as if the cameraman is running right after you trying to keep up. Headshots occasionally are blurred by pixelation, implying that the person's face you just killed is now literally unrecognizable due to your brutality. And when you die, the blood splattered camera drops to the floor along with your character's corpse. The last thing that it records either being your dead body, an upside down angle of the man who ended your life, or just absolutely nothing. At the start of new chapters, the cutscenes always begin as if the camera was literally just turned on moments before the action begins. On the same note, those same chapters always end as if the camera is physically being turned off. Sometimes this even happens in the middle of dialogue.
Shit, Lynch! What was that? What the fuck was that? Fucking believe it! Fuck!
During loading screens, instead of the usual loading bar you find in a video game, you get a rotating buffering symbol, as if everything that we're experiencing has been uploaded to some sketchy, obscure video hosting site, for the entertainment of morbidly curious people wanting to watch two horrible men rampage through Shanghai. Random frames recorded by the camcorder flash on the screen to give some light context as to what's happening as the game loads, and we hear a phone conversation between either Lynch or Kane, either setting up what the next mission is going to be, or just one of them talking to a loved one for comfort.
Jenny, it's your father. I know we haven't spoken since, I hope we can put the past behind us. I'm done with all this, baby. If you don't see me, I want you to know. I love you.
One clever detail is that throughout these phone calls, you can always hear GSM interference in the audio throughout the dialogue, further reinforcing how everything is being recorded.
Hello? Hey, hon. I'll be there. I promise.
The shitty audio quality from the camcorder's microphone is constantly heard throughout the game. It constantly peaks, be it from Kane Lynch shouting at each other, to the loud gunfire, to deafening explosions. Sometimes you can't even hear them due to the background noise. One good example being the level that takes place in a skyscraper with blown out windows, but all we can hear is just wind obscuring the dialogue.
Guess so. Prissy little shit. Come on, boys. Let's be civilized. You gotta be fucking kidding.
Firefights in the game are just absolute auditory torture. They're jumbled, confusing messes of men screaming, civilians shouting, loud guns, just complete mayhem. And all of this backed by the most haunting, sometimes downright horrifying abstract music I think I've ever heard in a third-person shooter game.
There's no one here. I don't like this. Lynch, check the building. See if Singh's still here.
Got it. Kane, come with me.
Every single visual audio detail of this game has been carefully crafted not to ensure your fun, pleasure, or enjoyment. In fact, it is the complete opposite. Kane Lynch 2 might just be the first and so far only third-person found footage horror shooter game. And the horror in this case isn't even monsters, ghosts, zombies, no. It all comes from one thing that can be summed up with 3 words. Before I properly begin this analysis, I would like to first point out that this is not a review of Kane Lynch 2. There are more than enough of those out there on YouTube, and to be fair, the general consensus that this game has that it's a bad game is pretty much correct. Don't get me wrong here, this is not a polished game in any way whatsoever. It's unfinished, it's buggy, and it crashes the desktop often when loading. To get this game to work, I literally had to block it in my firewall because apparently it connecting to the internet was making it crash on the main menu. I'm not even joking. Still, however, I feel like that it's important to analyze this game regardless, because its entire presentation style is still something that has yet to be properly replicated. Before I get into the story, I would like to warn that there will be spoilers in this video, as I will be talking about several plot elements in detail. So don't say I didn't warn you.
Nightmare, 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 nightmare.
The story in this game is very self-contained, meaning that playing the first game isn't really required to understand it. It follows Lynch, a mentally ill ex-bank robber who is living in Shanghai with his girlfriend Zhu, while also working for a guy named Glazer, a British man with many contacts who just managed to set up an illegal arms deal to send guns to Africa. Lynch also wants to reconnect with his old friend Kane, an ex-bank robber who was the main character of the first game. After years of the two of them not seeing each other, Lynch manages to convince Kane to fly over to Shanghai to participate in this deal. Before the two can even meet up with Glazer, however, Lynch says that he needs to settle things with a certain informant who's been trying to snitch on Glazer, a man named Brady. As soon as they, quote-unquote, knock on the door, Brady tries to escape and the two take off after him. A long chase ensues on the streets of Shanghai that ends up with many gangsters and even possibly civilians getting shot down. The chase ends once Brady is cornered. Like a coward, however, he tries to use his own girlfriend as a meat shield. She ends up getting ruthlessly gunned down by both of the protagonists, and then after that, Brady takes his own life.
What just happened? Did he just... The fuck just happened?
The two protagonists then proceed to the arms deal like nothing ever happened. What neither of them knew, however, is that the girl that they had just killed was the daughter of a powerful politician in Shanghai, who would now be determined to have the two criminals pay for it, no matter the cost. The ensuing missions after this are just things getting progressively worse and worse for both Kane and Lynch, as the entirety of Shanghai goes against them one by one, with the two of them doing their absolute best to survive while also trying to understand what exactly is going on. Kane Lynch 2 is a game that doesn't really have many characters, or even exactly a fluid storyline. Every character that aren't the protagonists get very little screen time, with the main villain himself getting a staggering 30 seconds of screen time before being shot dead instantly. One might even say that this makes the narrative poor because we don't get the chance to be attached to any of these side characters like Lynch's love interest, for example. And that's a very valid opinion, but what else is there to learn about a character like Glazer, for example? We know everything that we need to know about him in his introductory cutscene.
So, how'd you like Shanghai, Kane?
It's fucked. I hate it.
Yeah, I love it too. You know you can get your hair washed and a shag for 51. Bloody brilliant. Yeah, I'll take you out sometime. This town was built for people like us.
And Shanxi, the politician, as little screen time as he gets, everything that he does in the game pretty much sums him up perfectly. Kane Lynch killed his daughter and are now constantly on the verge of being assassinated by the police and eventually even the military. The only time he attempts to reason with them is when he's cornered and doesn't have anywhere to run to. The game isn't about these characters, it's about Kane Lynch. I mean, fuck me, it's literally the name of the game. Kane Lynch 2 is more like a character study of Kane Lynch themselves in an environment that is completely out of their comfort zone, and how they completely screw up that adapting to it by trying to force things their own way. Throughout the entire campaign, both of these characters seem to either not grasp the concept of consequence, or simply do not care. Not only do they mercilessly gun down the daughter of a powerful politician, but they also allow themselves to be captured and tortured. Don't envision themselves to getting betrayed by Glazer despite how obvious it was that he was going to do it in the first place. He's literally British. Hijack a helicopter, then crash in a harebrained attempt to escape Shanghai, gun down Shanxi, making them China's most wanted, and at the very end of the game, they hijack an entire commercial airliner to escape the country, possibly sealing their fate for good, because either that plane is gonna crash and burn considering how awful their luck is, or it's gonna land in an airport somewhere, and they're immediately going to be shot dead by whatever army is waiting for them at the TSA terminal. Both of these men are incredibly destructive and cannot be trusted with the simplest of things. They're like two bulls rampaging across Shanghai in a mix of anger and fear. That's all that this game is about. And honestly, that's exactly everything it needs to be.
We're two white, blood-covered guys in China.
This isn't an epic tale about two Americans wiping out all the filth of Shanghai while making sarcastic comments and Marvel quips. It's about two mass-murdering psychopaths just trying to survive and absolutely destroying the city as a result. The way that the game itself portrays this is fantastic. Take, for example, the ambience after you blow up the propane store, which also coincidentally blows out your ears. It's simply absolutely phenomenal.
Stay on the streets. Through the kitchen. There's gotta be an alley.
I find that this moment perfectly encapsulates everything that this game is about. Kane and Lynch together are like a cornered bear, realizing that he can't flee anymore, so he has to fight for its survival. And the results are finally catastrophic. The smoke in the air, the scattered debris on the ground. If this game had gore, this would be the perfect time for it, because of the dozens of dead cops on the floor. The track playing in the background has a distorted melancholic female voice trying to sing over an overbearing electronic drone. It reminds me of an angel, singing in despair as it realizes not only what Shanghai has become, but also in mourning for all the innocent lives that have been caught in the crossfire between two despicable men and the corrupt police force of Shanghai, as if now God himself has turned his back on the main characters. would like to pay special attention to this game's soundtrack. Kane Lynch 2 probably has the most unique soundtrack I've ever heard in a mainstream third-person shooter game, because of how much it just completely flees from the traditional action video game music you tend to hear in titles like, say, Uncharted or Gears of War. Instead of action drums and an orchestral track to back an epic action tale, you have this. Kane Lynch 2 actually features two soundtracks, one of them being music that was actually licensed for the game from various Chinese pop artists. Interestingly, you barely ever hear these tracks because the only time you catch them playing during the game is over radios or speakers, be it during gameplay or during the several different menu screens, adding an extra tone of realism for the game. But then we have the actual second soundtrack composed by Mona Mur, a German musician who also helped with the sound design for the game. The music here is entirely original, composed for the game proper, and in my opinion, it fits the game like a glove. Instead of going for a more conventional action video game soundtrack, Mona went for something that really encapsulates the intensity of the game proper and the absolute dire situations that the protagonists find themselves in, being entirely composed of ambient soundscapes and, when called for, harsh, loud synth noises that seem to be trying to simulate the stress of a firefight. When the game starts with you walking up to Brady's door, all you can hear in the background is this really booming, loud sound of what sounds like a distorted fluorescent light, grounding the game in this urban hellscape that it takes place in.
It's a shithole. Now where does he live? Up there.
Later on in the second chapter, when we meet Glazer, the sinister drone plays in the background throughout his entire character introduction.
Get the cargo to Africa. You'll get paid.
The exports are dealt with?
They're so fucking happy. They're going blind.
Not only does this also further reinforce how much of a shit person Glazer is, but considering that this plays right after that girl gets shot, this track also carries this impending doom sort of vibe, which becomes a reality when the limo is soon attacked by hitmen. Later down the line, the limousine gets crashed into by a truck, with the ambient score immediately switching to this loud, high-pitched whine, the kind of thing you'd hear when a slasher corners his victim in a horror movie. Combine this with the ambient soundscape of this mission, the sirens of police cars and ambulances, the overwhelming sound of gunfire and bullets ricocheting around, the characters screaming at each other. The atmosphere, once again, is absolutely incredible. Never at any moment during this game do you feel safe. The music is like a constant reminder of how things are against you, with odds stacking against you more and more every second. In the very last mission of the game, when Kane and Lynch are making their way through an airport to steal a plane to get out of China, the track in the background consists of distorted synths trying to mimic airplane sounds. Considering that it starts playing right after we get to Glazer's plane and we find out that it's been taken apart, it's almost like the score of the game is mocking the main characters with their inability to use that plane to escape. This vibe carries on through the entire game. It never lets up. You're always struggling for survival in every single situation you find yourself in, and ironically enough, the game's janky gunplay perfectly encapsulates this. I have no idea if this was meant to be intentional, but every gun in this game's accuracy is absolutely dog shit, especially the automatic weapons. Your crosshair is more like a suggestion for where your bullets are gonna go rather than an assurance, and the cover system is just not functional. You can take cover and enemy bullets will just fucking curve into you. The result of all this? An absolutely stressful nightmare, and it greatly fits this game. Imagine, if you will, if the gunplay in this game was flawless. Taking cover means you're 100% protected and your accuracy is less of a mentally ill man and more of a SEAL team operator. It would mean that you would just barrel through every single gunfight in the game without a hitch, and that would completely clash with the game's tone. At all times, you are meant to feel exhausted, drained, stressed out. Remember, these are just two criminals just trying to get out of life in Shanghai. They are completely overwhelmed at all times. If you could just easily headshot every enemy in front of you with perfect accuracy, you wouldn't have the same experience. Then the game would just play like any other third-person shooter game.
This is all I got.
I got a boner!
So, does this mean that the gameplay is secretly good? Is Kane Lynch 2 actually a hidden gem? Absolutely not.
Naked men and crappy YouTube effects.
But you cannot deny that this awful gameplay, incredibly ironically, perfectly fits this game. A game where everything is awful. Usually, we perceive video games as purely entertainment. You know, something to kick back, relax, and just put on after a long day of work or school. A way to get away from the world and just de-stress for a little bit. But do video games really have to just be that? Entertainment? I personally don't think so. If we want to start considering video games to be art, we have to start accepting that even video games that aren't technically good by our usual standards of a good video game still have some merit to them. And I think Kane Lynch 2 is a perfect example of that. There is an interesting message you can get from this game. Think about the fact that everything is being recorded with a camcorder and is implied to be posted on a sketchy website somewhere on the internet. While Kane Lynch 2 is fiction and just a video game, this kind of thing is absolutely true. It's very easy to gain access to real life violence on the internet. Sites like LiveLeak and Best Score, even though both of those are now shut down, were infamous for hosting videos depicting real suffering and death. A good chunk of those actually being recorded by the criminals themselves using their own cameras. A lot of criminal footage is also constantly caught on CCTV. The game's promotional campaign would even echo this by having some adverts being done from CCTV camera angles, showing Kane Lynch in some gunfights. Now, I ask you, how many real-life CCTV videos have you seen on the internet depicting people getting shot in, say, robberies or even just assassinations? For your sake, I really hope you never had the displeasure of seeing such a thing, but the reality is, morbid curiosity leads many people to watch that kind of content. So much that entire communities were built outside of consuming real gore, like the now defunct r/watchpeopledie on Reddit.
What up, Reddit?
Way back when I was younger, the internet was this wild wasteland where you could just post anything you wanted almost any way you wished. Back then, there were so many times where I had the misfortune of coming across horrific content, shock videos if you will. Growing up, for one reason or another, I feel like I've become almost completely desensitized to seeing real violence, to the point that these kinds of videos don't really faze me anymore. With that in mind, it feels like this game was made with those types of videos in mind. With the way that this game is presented, it's very clear that it doesn't try to glamorize it one bit, and instead seeks to demonize that kind of content. The chapter 1000 Cuts, for example, has the two main characters tortured on camera, with the lead's girlfriend suffering the worst of it. The entire concept of playing as two naked guys running through a city trying to escape the police would be comical in any other game if they weren't literally covered from head to toe in horrific cuts. What I find interesting, however, is that the only parts that are censored are their genitals. It kinda says something. We're more used to seeing people literally covered in gnarly bloody cuts across their entire body, but not their private parts. Though on the other hand, occasionally when a character suffers a headshot in the game, their head, or what remains of it, is sometimes blurred out by pixelation. This is a pretty cool effect, which makes you wonder how gruesome the actual result was. It also casually reminds me of the fact that you can literally watch police body cam videos on YouTube, and usually, the ones with the most views are the ones that end up with the suspect being shot, their body usually being blurred out in the video itself. Recently though, a really interesting game started making its way around the internet. A first-person shooter with currently no name, made by a person called Alexander Spindler if I'm not mistaken. The game is a first-person shooter in the perspective of a body cam, and the first thing that came to mind when I saw gameplay of it was Kane Lynch 2. I'm personally pretty intrigued to see more of this project, purely because it seems to be an exact product of how much nowadays we're just so interested in seeing more and more realism when it comes to video games. It makes me wonder if we're ever gonna get to a point where some shooters are just gonna start looking too real for some people, and also what kinds of crowds those games are going to begin to attract. Now, back to Kane Lynch. A lot of people have not played this game, purely because it's commonly accepted as a bad game, and like I said before, it is a bad game. However, I absolutely encourage you to play it, even if it's just for the presentation it has. It's truly unique and highly engrossing. Just don't go into it expecting to have fun. This game doesn't want you to have fun. Instead, it's trying to show you a slice of reality that isn't touched on by most action games, really. It's honestly hard to come across a game where you genuinely feel like it's just pumping straight sewage out of your monitor, and I mean that in the best way possible. Kane Lynch 2 is like an interactive LiveLeak video. Even other crime game franchises like Grand Theft Auto or Saints Row don't usually take this kind of criminal setting as seriously as Kane Lynch 2 does, satirizing everything for the sake of comedy and making it easier to digest for the mainstream audience. I'm honestly pleased that more people are starting to gravitate away from that and trying to get a more realistic outlook on reality presented by some video games that ditch the arcadey nature and satire for something more grounded. Games like Manhunt, Grand Theft Auto 4, and Far Cry 2 for example. So anyway, my main point is if you're gonna die out there, make sure someone's recording and make sure it's a cool death. Like running around the street naked and shooting at the police kinda cool. Or just shooting at the police. Shooting at the police is always cool.
Oh,